She has 38 minutes left. The words crackled through the speaker of Dr. Marcus Reed's phone just as red and blue lights exploded across his rearview mirror. Rain swept across Interstate 85 in silver sheets, blurring the Atlanta skyline into a haze of steel and glass. Marcus tightened his grip on the steering wheel. His navy scrubs were hidden beneath a charcoal rain jacket, and his hospital ID swung against his chest with every movement. The emergency call had come only 7 minutes earlier. A 42-year-old woman had been rushed into Memorial Regional Medical Center with a rapidly deteriorating aortic condition. The surgical team was assembled. The operating room was ready. The patient was losing time, and Marcus Reed was the only trauma surgeon within 50 miles qualified to perform the procedure. "Dr. Reed, are you still there?" the charge nurse asked through the car's Bluetooth system. Her voice sounded strained, thin with urgency. "I'm on my way," Marcus replied. "Tell anesthesia to hold position. I'll be there." But before he could finish, a police siren screamed behind him. He glanced at the dashboard clock. 7:22 p.m., 38 minutes. He eased his black Mercedes onto the shoulder. Rain hammered the roof. Traffic hissed past in long streaks of white light. Marcus reached automatically for his hospital credentials before the officer even stepped out of the patrol vehicle. He had learned years ago that preparation saved time. Sometimes it saved misunderstandings. Sometimes it didn't. The officer approached slowly through the rain, one hand resting near his utility belt. Water dripped from the brim of his cap. His flashlight beam swept across the luxury sedan before settling on Marcus. License and registration. Marcus handed them over calmly. "Officer, I'm a surgeon heading to an emergency operation. The hospital is expecting me." The officer glanced briefly at the documents, but seemed more interested in the vehicle than the man speaking. The flashlight lingered on the leather interior, the polished dashboard, the watch on Marcus's wrist. "Step out of the car, sir." Marcus blinked. "Is there a problem?" "Step out of the vehicle." Around them, thunder rolled across the darkening sky. Marcus complied, feeling cold rain soak through his jacket almost instantly. His phone buzzed again. Memorial Regional. The officer noticed the screen lighting up. "You can answer after we sort this out." Marcus looked toward the glowing city in the distance. Somewhere beyond those buildings, a surgical suite stood ready. Stainless steel instruments waited beneath bright operating lights. Nurses checked monitors. Anesthesiologists reviewed charts. And on a hospital bed, a woman Marcus had never met was fighting for minutes she did not have. His phone rang again. Then again. Then again. Each vibration felt heavier than the last. The officer studied something on a tablet inside his cruiser before looking back at Marcus. "You're going to need to come with me." For a moment, the rain seemed to fall harder. Marcus stared at the flashing lights reflecting across the wet pavement. Then he slowly turned his eyes toward the dashboard clock glowing through the windshield. 36 minutes left. 36 minutes. The glowing numbers remained fixed in Marcus Reed's mind as rainwater rolled down the side window of the patrol car. The officer sat behind the wheel, typing into a terminal mounted beside the dashboard. Blue light from the screen washed across his face. Outside, traffic continued moving through the storm, headlights stretching into long ribbons across the interstate. Marcus sat silently in the passenger seat, his hospital identification still hanging around his neck. The plastic badge reflected the intermittent flashes of emergency lights outside. "Surgeon, Trauma Department, Memorial Regional Medical Center." The words were printed clearly enough for anyone to read. Yet somehow they felt invisible. His phone vibrated again. Then again. Then again. The officer glanced at the screen, but made no move to hand it over. Marcus looked down at his folded hands and forced himself to breathe slowly. Panic never helped anyone. Not in an emergency room. Not in an operating suite. Not on the side of a highway. Especially not now. For nearly 15 years, Marcus had trained himself to remain calm while chaos unfolded. Around him, he remembered sleeping 3 hours a night during medical school. He remembered studying anatomy textbooks under flickering library lights while classmates went home for the holidays. He remembered the first life he helped save as a resident physician. He remembered the first life he could not save. Those memories had shaped him into the surgeon he had become. Not talent alone. Not luck. Discipline. Sacrifice. Persistence. His father used to leave home before sunrise every morning. Earl Reed spent 32 years driving sanitation routes across Atlanta. Rain, heat, holidays. It never mattered. Marcus could still remember the smell of coffee filling their tiny apartment before dawn and the sound of work boots crossing the kitchen floor. His father had always said the same thing. People will decide who you are before they know your name. Your job is to give them the truth anyway. At the time, Marcus had not fully understood what that meant. Years later, sitting inside a patrol car while a patient waited for him, he understood perfectly. Another vibration. Memorial Regional again. He imagined the surgical team gathering around a conference table. He imagined nurses checking monitors. He imagined physicians reviewing scans for the 10th time, hoping they had overlooked some alternative solution. But there was none. The patient's condition required immediate intervention. Every minute mattered. Marcus looked through the rain-streaked windshield. Across the median, an ambulance raced southbound with lights flashing. For a brief moment, he wondered where it was going. Someone else's emergency. Someone else's family waiting for news. Someone else's race against time. The officer finally spoke. "You said you were a doctor?" Marcus nodded. "Trauma surgeon." The officer continued typing. "That is a pretty expensive car for a surgeon." Marcus stared at him for a moment. The comment hung in the air between them. Quiet. Uncomfortable. Familiar. He had heard versions of it before. At restaurants. At conferences. At valet stands. Different words. Same assumption. Marcus looked back toward the interstate. Rain drummed steadily against the roof. His reflection stared. Back from the side window. A tired face. A dark rain jacket. A man trying to reach a hospital. Nothing more. Nothing less. The dashboard clock advanced another minute. 35 minutes left. 35 minutes. Across the city, Memorial Regional Medical Center glowed against the storm like a ship fighting rough seas. Inside the cardiovascular intensive care unit, monitors cast pale green light across the room, where Emily Whitmore lay surrounded by specialists. The steady rhythm on the screen had become less reassuring with every passing minute. Nurses moved quickly but quietly. The air carried the scent of antiseptic and warm electronics. No one wasted words. Everyone understood the situation. Dr. Allison Chun stood at the foot of the bed reviewing the latest scans. She had performed hundreds of complex procedures during her career, but this case was different. The damage was progressing faster than expected. She looked toward the clock mounted above the doorway. Time was becoming their greatest enemy. A resident physician stepped beside her. "Any update?" he asked softly. Allison exhaled. "We are still waiting." She did not need to say the name. Everyone in the room already knew it. Marcus Reed, the surgeon who had built a reputation for handling cases other doctors considered impossible. The surgeon whose judgment remained steady when panic threatened to overwhelm an operating room. The surgeon who somehow inspired confidence simply by walking through the door. Across the hallway, Chief Daniel Whitmore stood near a rain-covered window overlooking the parking garage. His shoulders appeared heavier than the dark overcoat hanging from them. For 27 years, he had spent his life solving problems, leading investigations, making decisions, restoring order when situations spiraled out of control. Yet tonight he could do nothing except wait. His wife had always been the calm center of his world. Emily remembered birthdays when he forgot, sent encouraging messages before difficult meetings, stayed awake during long nights when work followed him home. Now she lay only a few yards away, and he felt completely powerless. A hospital administrator approached. "Carefully, Chief, we are doing everything possible." Daniel nodded without looking away from the ring. "Where is Dr. Reed?" The administrator hesitated. "We are still trying to reach him." That answer offered no comfort. Back on the interstate, Marcus watched water race down the patrol car window in winding streams. His phone remained silent now. Somehow that worried him even more. Calls meant hope. Calls meant people still believed he could get there in time. Silence meant the situation was changing. The officer continued scrolling through records on the computer terminal. The blue glow reflected across the windshield. Marcus studied the dashboard clock. 34 minutes. Somewhere beyond the rain, beyond the traffic, beyond the flashing lights, a surgical team waited. A husband waited. A family waited. He thought about Emily Whitmore without knowing her name. To Marcus, every patient began the same way. Not as a chart. Not as a diagnosis. Not as a room number. A person. Someone loved by somebody. Someone whose absence would leave an empty chair at a dinner table. An unanswered phone call. A silence where laughter used to be. Thunder rolled across the city again. The officer finally looked up from the screen. His expression remained uncertain. Then his radio crackled to life. A dispatcher's voice broke through the static. Unit 12, confirm identity status immediately. We have received multiple urgent inquiries from Memorial Regional Medical Center regarding your detained subject. The dispatcher's voice lingered in the patrol car like a sudden change in air pressure. Officer Ryan Collins picked up the radio microphone and frowned. Rain tapped steadily against the windshield. Repeat that, he said. Static crackled. Then the dispatcher spoke again. Memorial Regional has contacted Central Communications multiple times. They are requesting immediate confirmation regarding Dr. Marcus Reed. Ryan's eyes shifted slowly toward Marcus. For the first time since the stop began, uncertainty replaced confidence. Marcus sat quietly, water droplets still clinging to his jacket sleeves. His hospital badge rested against his chest exactly where it had been from the beginning. Nothing about it had changed. The only thing changing was how people were finally looking at it. Dr. Reed, Ryan asked. Marcus nodded once. That is what I have been telling you. The officer looked away and opened another screen on the computer terminal. His fingers moved faster now. Names, credentials, employment records, professional licenses. One after another appeared across the monitor. The blue glow illuminated his face as he read. Trauma surgeon, board certified, Memorial Regional Medical Center. 15 years of experience. Numerous commendations. Ryan swallowed. Outside, another wave of traffic rushed through the storm. Marcus glanced at the dashboard clock. 32 minutes. The number seemed smaller than it should have been. At Memorial Regional, the atmosphere had tightened further. Dr. Allison Chin stood outside the operating suite reviewing fresh reports. A nurse approached carrying a tablet. Blood pressure is continuing to trend downward, she said quietly. Allison closed her eyes for a brief moment. The hallway lights reflected against polished floors. Every passing second felt louder than the one before it. Across the corridor, Chief Daniel Whitmore remained near the window. His phone rested in his hand. He had called administrators, supervisors, department contacts, anyone who might have information. Every answer led back to the same question. Where was Marcus Reed? The rain beyond the glass seemed endless. Daniel looked toward the intensive care unit doors. He could not see Emily from there, but he pictured her smile anyway. He remembered Sunday mornings, family cookouts, quiet drives through the Georgia countryside. Small moments suddenly felt larger when they were threatened. Back on the interstate, Ryan's radio crackled again. Unit 12, Hospital Administration is requesting direct contact with Dr. Reed immediately. The officer stared at the message, then at Marcus, then back at the screen. A long silence followed. Marcus could almost hear the ticking of the dashboard clock beneath the hum of the engine. Finally, Ryan handed over the phone. You should answer that. Marcus accepted it immediately. The call connected before he even lifted it fully to his ear. Dr. Reed, Allison Chin said, relief flooding her voice. Thank God. We have been trying to reach you for nearly 20 minutes. Marcus looked through the windshield at the rain-covered highway stretching toward the city lights. I know, he said softly. Tell me exactly where we stand. The answer came after a pause. Not because Allison did not know it, because saying it aloud made it real. We have 30 minutes left, maybe less. Marcus lowered the phone slowly after the call ended. The words remained lodged in his mind. 30 minutes, maybe less. The rain outside seemed quieter now, as if the entire world had paused to listen. Officer Ryan Collins stared at the computer terminal in front of him. The confidence that had defined his posture earlier was gone. In its place sat uncertainty, growing heavier with every new line of information on the screen. Marcus could see it happening. The realization, the recalculation, the uncomfortable moment when assumptions collided with facts. Yet none of that mattered to him. Not now. Not with a patient waiting. Officer, Marcus said calmly. Every minute we spend here is a minute she does not have. Ryan looked up. His jaw tightened. I am trying to figure this out. Marcus glanced toward the glowing dashboard clock. 29 minutes. There is nothing left to figure out. The words were not angry. They were tired. Across Atlanta, the storm continued sweeping across rooftops and highways. At Memorial Regional, Dr. Allison Chin stood beside the operating suite doors watching nurses move supplies into position. Stainless steel instruments reflected bright overhead lights. Monitors hummed softly. Everything was ready except the one person they needed most. A young nurse adjusted a surgical tray and looked toward Allison. "Do you think he will make it?" Allison hesitated before answering. "He always finds a way." But even she heard the uncertainty hiding beneath her own voice. Down the hall, Chief Daniel Whitmore sat alone for the first time all evening. The waiting room had emptied. Staff members moved quietly around him, careful not to interrupt his thoughts. A cup of coffee sat untouched beside his chair. The surface had long since gone cold. He stared at a framed family photo on his phone. Emily stood smiling beneath a bright summer sky. Their daughter stood between them. Three faces frozen in a moment that suddenly felt precious beyond measure. Daniel rubbed his eyes. Years spent leading officers had taught him how quickly life could change. One phone call, one decision, one mistake. Yet none of those lessons made waiting easier. Back on the interstate, Ryan's radio crackled once more. This time the voice was different. Sharper. More urgent. Unit 12, command is requesting immediate status. Repeat, immediate status. Ryan picked up the microphone. For a moment he said nothing. Rain drummed against the roof. Traffic continued rushing past. Marcus watched the officer struggle with what came next. Finally Ryan spoke. Subject identity confirmed. The dispatcher responded instantly. Then why is he still there? Silence filled the patrol car. Ryan lowered the microphone slowly. The question lingered in the air. Marcus looked toward the city lights glowing through the storm. Somewhere ahead, a woman fought for her life. Somewhere ahead, a husband waited for news. Somewhere ahead stood an operating room that should already have been in motion. The dashboard clock advanced again. 28 minutes. Marcus closed his eyes briefly and took a slow breath. Then he opened them and fixed his gaze on the road leading toward the hospital. Every second now felt like a door quietly closing. The patrol car suddenly felt smaller. Not because anything inside had changed, but because the weight of time had grown heavier. Officer Ryan Collins remained motionless for several seconds, staring through the rain-streaked windshield. The flashing lights reflected off the wet pavement in waves of red and blue. Marcus Reed sat quietly beside him. He was no longer trying to explain himself, no longer trying to convince anyone. The facts were already there. The credentials, the calls, the hospital confirmations, everything that should have mattered from the beginning. Yet the minutes were gone anyway. Marcus looked at the dashboard clock. 27 minutes. The glowing numbers seemed almost unreal now. He thought about the operating room waiting across the city, the sterile lights, the prepared instruments, the team standing ready. He could picture every detail without being there. Years of experience had made those rooms feel as familiar as home. But tonight he was separated from that world by something far more difficult to overcome than distance. He leaned his head back against the seat and closed his eyes for a moment. The soft hum of the engine filled the silence. Rain tapped steadily against the glass. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the city. Marcus did not think about himself. He did not think about headlines or apologies or explanations. He thought about a woman lying in a hospital bed surrounded by people who loved her. He thought about the fear her family must be carrying. He thought about the promise every physician silently makes when they choose the profession. Show up. Help. Do everything possible. The promise sounded simple until circumstances tested it. Across town, Emily Whitmore remained surrounded by machines and quiet urgency. Nurses adjusted equipment beneath pale overhead lighting. Dr. Allison Chun reviewed reports once more, though she already knew every detail by heart. The intensive care unit felt suspended between motion and stillness. Everyone was working. Everyone was waiting. Chief Daniel Whitmore stood outside the room now. One hand rested against the glass. He watched his wife breathe. The sight should have comforted him. Instead, it reminded him how fragile everything had become. He remembered meeting Emily during college. A rainy afternoon at a campus coffee shop. A conversation that lasted 3 hours. A laugh he never forgot. Decades later, after careers and children and countless ordinary days, she was still the first person he wanted to see every morning. The thought tightened something deep inside his chest. Back on the interstate, Ryan finally spoke. His voice sounded different than before. Quieter. Less certain. My father died waiting for a surgeon once. Marcus opened his eyes. The officer kept staring forward. Bad weather. Delays. Nobody could get there in time. Rain slid down the windshield in shimmering lines. I spent years thinking if people had just moved faster, maybe things would have been different. Marcus listened without interrupting. Ryan swallowed hard. And now I am the reason someone else is waiting. Neither man spoke afterward. The silence settled gently between them. Outside, the storm continued moving across Atlanta. Inside the patrol car, the dashboard clock advanced once more. 26 minutes remained. The radio erupted before either man could say another word. Unit 12, respond immediately. Chief Whitmore is requesting direct communication. Ryan grabbed the microphone so quickly it nearly slipped from his hand. This is Unit 12. Static hissed across the channel. Then a new voice arrived. Older, controlled, but carrying the unmistakable strain of a man standing at the edge of something he could not stop. This is Chief Daniel Whitmore. Ryan straightened instinctively. Chief. The pause that followed felt endless. Rain continued drumming against the roof, while traffic streamed through the darkness beyond the windshield. Tell me exactly where Dr. Reed is, Daniel said. Ryan looked toward Marcus. The surgeon remained silent. Calm. Waiting. He is with me, Chief. Another pause. Longer this time. Then Daniel spoke again. With you? The words came out slowly, as though his mind was struggling to accept them. Across the city, hospital monitors continued their steady chorus of electronic tones. Nurses moved through hallways illuminated by sterile white light. Time kept moving forward whether anyone was ready or not. Daniel's voice returned to the radio. Dr. Marcus Reed, Memorial Regional Trauma Surgery Department. Ryan swallowed. Yes, sir. Somewhere in the background of the transmission, Ryan could hear hospital activity. Doors opening. Footsteps. Voices speaking urgently. Then Daniel asked the question that changed everything. Why is he not here? Ryan opened his mouth, but no answer came. Every explanation suddenly sounded smaller than the reality surrounding it. The rain. The assumptions. The delay. The lost minutes. None of it sounded reasonable anymore. Inside Memorial Regional, Allison Chin stepped into the hallway carrying updated reports. She stopped when she saw Daniel standing near a nurse's station, holding a phone tightly against his ear. His face had changed. The worry was still there, but something else had appeared beneath it. Understanding. Daniel turned toward the intensive care unit window. Through the glass, he could see Emily resting beneath the soft glow of medical equipment. Then he looked at the family photograph still displayed on his phone screen. His wife smiling beside him, their daughter laughing between them. Ordinary happiness preserved in a frozen image. Suddenly the situation became painfully clear. The surgeon his team desperately needed. The surgeon his hospital could not locate. The surgeon his officers had stopped from reaching the operating room. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. The realization landed with crushing force. Not because of protocol. Not because of embarrassment. Because every minute lost belonged to Emily now. Back on the interstate, Ryan heard the chief inhale slowly. When Daniel spoke again, his voice carried absolute certainty. Release him immediately. Ryan nodded before remembering the chief could not see him. Yes, sir. And listen carefully. Daniel's tone softened. Dr. Reed is not just important tonight. He is the reason my wife still has a chance. The patrol car fell silent. Marcus lowered his gaze toward the dashboard clock. 24 minutes remained. Ryan reached for the door handle. Outside, the storm continued sweeping across Atlanta. But for the first time all night, the road ahead was finally opening. The patrol car door opened, and cold rain rushed into the cabin. Marcus stepped out immediately. He did not waste a second looking back. The interstate lights shimmered across the wet pavement as Ryan hurried around the front of the vehicle. His expression carried the weight of everything that had happened during the last half hour. Dr. Reed, he called out. Marcus stopped. Rain soaked both men as traffic continued streaming past in the darkness. For a moment, Ryan seemed unable to find the words. Then he lowered his head. Slightly. I am sorry. Marcus looked at him quietly. The apology was sincere. He could hear it in the officer's voice. He could see it in the tension across his face. But apologies belonged to later. Right now, somebody was still waiting. The patient comes first, Marcus said. Nothing more. No anger. No lecture. No accusation. Ryan nodded once. The simplicity of the answer somehow made it heavier. Moments later, another set of flashing lights appeared through the rain. A police escort arrived from the city. Doors opened. Commands were exchanged. Within seconds, Marcus was moving again. The Mercedes remained behind as he climbed into the lead vehicle. The siren activated. The convoy accelerated onto the highway. 23 minutes. Across Atlanta, lanes began opening ahead of them. Reflections of red and blue lights danced across office buildings, overpasses, and rain-covered streets. Marcus sat forward in his seat, watching the city rush past. Every intersection, every traffic signal, every mile mattered now. His phone rang again. Allison Chun. He answered immediately. I am moving. Relief filled the silence on the other end. How long? Marcus looked through the windshield. Tell the team 15 minutes. The line remained quiet for a moment. Then Allison answered. We will be ready. At Memorial Regional, word spread quickly. Nurses exchanged hopeful glances. Residents moved faster. Surgical staff completed final preparations. The atmosphere shifted. Not because the danger had disappeared, because possibility had returned. Chief Daniel Whitmore stood near the operating suite entrance when Allison approached him. He is coming. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. The breath leaving his lungs felt like the first full breath he had taken all night. Outside, the storm continued hammering the city. Inside, Hope carefully re-entered the building. The police escort crossed downtown Atlanta at high speed. Rain streaked across the windshield in silver lines. Marcus reviewed medical details from memory. Imaging reports. Lab values. Surgical strategy. His mind settled into familiar patterns. The anxiety surrounding the delay faded into the background. The moment he stepped into a hospital, none of that would matter. There would only be a patient. Only a procedure. Only a life hanging in the balance. The hospital finally appeared ahead through the rain. Bright windows glowed against the dark sky. Emergency entrance lights reflected across flooded pavement. As the convoy pulled beneath the covered entrance, staff members were already waiting. The vehicle stopped. Marcus opened the door before anyone else could reach it. Cool air rushed past him. Hospital doors slid open. 20 minutes remained. Without slowing down, he moved toward the operating suite where an entire team stood ready. Behind him, rain continued falling across Atlanta. Ahead of him, every remaining second would have to count. The operating room doors closed behind Marcus Reed, and the outside world disappeared. The rain, the sirens, the delays, the misunderstandings, all of it faded beneath bright surgical lights and focused determination. Hours passed. In the waiting area, Chief Daniel Whitmore sat alone beneath the soft glow of overhead fixtures. The storm had finally begun to weaken outside. Water still traced slow paths down the hospital windows, but the thunder was gone. The waiting room felt suspended between night and morning. A paper coffee cup rested untouched beside him. Nurses came and went. Administrators checked in quietly. No one had answers yet. Daniel found himself staring at the floor, replaying the evening again and again. Every choice, every lost minute, every moment that could never be returned. Across the building, Officer Ryan Collins remained seated near the emergency entrance. His uniform was dry now, but he still felt the cold weight of the rain from earlier. He had spent years believing that experience helped people judge situations quickly. Tonight had taught him something different. Sometimes the most important thing a person could do was slow down long enough to truly see who was standing in front of them. Just after dawn, the operating room doors finally opened. The hallway fell quiet. Marcus stepped out wearing fresh scrubs and a tired expression. The bright lights above reflected softly across the polished floor. For a moment, nobody moved. Daniel rose from his chair so quickly it nearly tipped backward. His eyes searched Marcus's face for an answer before a single word was spoken. Marcus removed his surgical cap. The exhaustion was visible, but so was something else. Calm, steady certainty. She is stable, he said. The words landed gently, yet they seemed to fill the entire hallway. Daniel closed his eyes. A long breath escaped his chest. Not the breath of victory. Not the breath of celebration. The breath of relief. The breath of someone who had been carrying fear for an entire night and could finally set it down. When he opened his eyes again, they were shining. He stepped forward slowly. Dr. Reed, he said, his voice unsteady. I do not know how to thank you. Marcus glanced toward the intensive care unit doors. Your wife needed help, he replied. That is what mattered. Daniel lowered his head. For several seconds, neither man spoke. The silence carried more meaning than a speech ever could. Nearby, Ryan Collins stood quietly, watching. Marcus turned and noticed him. The officer looked as though he wanted to apologize again. Marcus simply offered a small nod. Nothing dramatic. Nothing theatrical. just understanding. Morning sunlight began breaking through the clouds outside. Golden light spilled across the hospital corridor, replacing the cold, gray shadows of the night. Daniel looked toward the window where the first clear rays reflected across the floor. Then he looked back at Marcus. The surgeon had already started walking toward another patient, another responsibility, another day of service. No celebration, no demand for recognition, just quiet purpose. Daniel watched him disappear down the hallway. In that moment, the chief understood something he would never forget. Real strength was not found in authority, uniforms, titles, or power. Sometimes it walked through a hospital before sunrise, carrying compassion stronger than pride, and choosing to save a life when it had every reason to walk away.